This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
CBD is a game changer sweeping the nation. This hemp extract is the natural way to elevate your mood, eliminate aches and pains, reduce anxiety, and keep you sleeping all night long. It can even cut your workout recovery time in half. Get in the game today with 20% off all orders of CBD and lavender products from Lavender Lane, a lavender farm located right here in Milan, Michigan. Just go to lavenderlanemi.com today and enter coupon code DETROIT for 20% off your entire order. Guys, look, these amazing products are infused with calming lavender to maximize their effectiveness, meaning your CBD items only take minutes to take effect, which is way quicker than those pills you were about to swallow. On top of it, they are perfect for men and women. Lavender Lane has lab-tested CBD creams, tinctures, and roll-ons that are perfect for any situation, even if you're on the go. Put your health back in your hands by heading over to lavenderlanemi.com and entering coupon code DETROIT for 20% off your entire order of CBD and lavender products. What do you have to lose? Your satisfaction is guaranteed or your money back. So if you need lavender gifts for your loved ones or just looking for the natural way to ease your discomfort with CBD, go to lavenderlanemi.com and use coupon code DETROIT to unlock these miraculous benefits of CBD and lavender. That's lavenderlanemi.com. And remember, use coupon code DETROIT for 20% off your CBD and lavender products from Michigan's own Lavender Lane.
Speed in space is dead. Harball lives. More on that, plus Michigan basketball getting underway next on this week's episode of Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison. Brady gets terrific. Throws it and a touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harball back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. We're going to talk Michigan hoops on our Michigan Roundtable segment with Wolverine Digest, Michael Spath, and Brandon Brown coming up a little bit later on in this episode. But let's begin with some football. The Wolverines go out to Maryland and win 38-7. This is a perennial event now under Jim Harball. Michigan just wiping the field or the floor with the Maryland Terrapins. And is there a weirder team than Maryland? They're just weird. The uniforms they wear, now they went to these 80s throwbacks on Saturday. It's a much better look. But the uniforms they typically wear, who has right-footed and left-footed punters? Their quarterbacks are always hurt. They're just weird. It's just a weird vibe out of that program. And, they still have Mike Locksley for the coach, who I think is now 6-37 all time as a head coach. So will you be in? But, Michigan goes out there, gets the job done, beginning with Giles Jackson, opening kickoff return for a touchdown for the Wolverines. First time Michigan's done that since Northwestern, to open a game since Northwestern in 2015. That set the tone, but it depends on, your thoughts on this game kind of depends on your perspective. If you think, hey, it's just one game, each game is its own individual entity, winning by 31 points on the road, you take that, particularly given some of the struggles Michigan's had wearing those all whites in recent years. On the other hand, if you're looking ahead to really the one last meaningful accomplishment this team can achieve, when you look at it, beating Michigan State always matters quite a bit. Now that's coming up in the next game here in 2 weeks. But when you had your preseason goals, there were 3: the college football playoff, winning the Big Ten finally, and finally beating Ohio State. Only one of those goals remains. And I'm just going to tell you, the effort Michigan put forth on Saturday ain't getting that done. 331 yards. Most college football teams in this day and age can't win a game with that meager yardage. Michigan won this by 31 points. Well, how did they do it? Well, here's what we've learned. And, we wondered, was this just because of the rain last week against Notre Dame? Nope. Wasn't just the rain. That had something to do with it, but it wasn't just the rain. I think we can now say officially that speed and space is dead. Whatever offense Josh Gaddis was brought here to install, and why didn't it take? We'll never know. We're not at practices. We're not at camp. We're not there in the spring. So we have no way of knowing. All we can go by is what we see on game day. And what we saw on game day was an offense that could not get out of its way, could not execute at a high level, couldn't be efficient, couldn't be potent, and was more known for turning the ball over than anything else. And it threatened to wreck the season. And what's transpired now is Michigan is adjusted. And the way that it's adjusted is speed and space, dead as a doornail. Harball lives. Defense, running game, special teams, field position. That's how Michigan won by 31 points despite only 331 yards. And hey, that brand of football has proven to be very successful around here about 75% of the time these last 5 years. The issue is that other 25%, and that's why Josh Gaddis was brought here, to make Michigan more multiple, explosive on offense for games when they're not holding a team to 40% completions, and they may need to put up 28, 35 points in order to beat those higher ranked teams like, say, Ohio State. Well, that's out the window. And I think a big reason why is the quarterback. I think Michigan has come to grips with the fact that Shea Patterson is a nice player. He's just not a guy, those offenses are quarterback centric. Your quarterback has to be the straw that stirs the drink. And I just don't think Shea Patterson is that player. I think he's a nice player. He's plucky, gritty, gutty, but he just can't carry a program at that level. He's really a more talented Jake Rudock, although he's not having nearly the year Rudock had, his 1 year here under Harball. Maybe a more talented Wilton Spate is a better way of putting it. But he's just not a guy that you can just say, hey, the offense is in your hands. You're our Baker Mayfield, our Johnny Manziel, our Jim Harbaugh when he played here at Michigan. That's just not going to be Shea Patterson. And so I don't know that the downfield passing game is ever going to be a consistent threat. And I think Michigan has sent a signal that going back to the brand that Harbaugh has been known for most of his coaching career is where this season is ultimately going to ride or die. And I give Michigan credit for doing this, actually, because had they stuck with the speed and space, that this was poised to be a 7-5 kind of a season. And you don't want to have that kind of year in year 5. That wrecks your recruiting. That blows up the narrative to your program. That's a brand damaging season. But they went back to what they know best, and they have salvaged their brand and saved the season as a result. Now, it remains to be seen. Can the 5th time be the charm? Can this finally be the time this brand of football beats Ohio State with maybe Shea Patterson capable of making the 2, 3, or 4 throws that Wilton Spate couldn't make with that bum shoulder and John O'Corn simply just didn't have the ability to make back in 2017? That remains to be seen, and that will be the undiscovered country here. That's the question Michigan has to answer, because that's how they're going to have to beat Ohio State. They will not get into a shootout with them if they can avoid it. They simply don't have the offensive capability to do that with the current quarterback. Maybe we'll see more speed and space next year. Who knows? But as far as 2019 is concerned, it's dead. We'll come back, find out what Michael Spath and Brandon Brown from Wolverine Digest and WTKA in Ann Arbor, what they think about that, as well as Michigan basketball getting underway. In fact, we'll start by talking about hoops next. Hey, I want to introduce you to a brand new partner of ours here at Michigan Podcast, Hero Soap Company. Check these guys out. Veteran-owned soap company. Sign up for a subscription and get soap delivered right to your door each and every month. 3 different options starting at just $5 a month, all the way up to the Battalion package, or as I like to call it, the Buckeye package. 3 bars of soap each month for those Buckeye fans out there who need some extra help getting that stink off. The best part of this is Hero Soap Company donates a portion of each purchase to help veterans and active military, something all of us can unite behind. Wolverines, Buckeyes, Sparties alike. Use the promo code Michigan Podcast and get 10% off of your order. Promo code Michigan Podcast, all one word, and get high quality soap without having to go to the store. Hero Soap Company. Check them out online at herosoapcompany.com. Let freedom clean. And we're back here on Michigan Podcast, joined now by my partners over at Wolverine Digest, Brandon Brown and Michael Spath, also both with WTKA in Ann Arbor. Gentlemen, good to have you back. Let's start with some basketball, with Michigan hoops getting underway tonight as we're taping this. The Juwan Howard era gets going against Appalachian State. You'll have to excuse my tick. I get this every time the term Appalachian State is said in reference to a season opener in a sporting event. I'm not exactly sure where that comes from. It's just kind of a nervous thing that I have. But what do you expect to see from the Wolverines tonight? A lot of mystery. Adrian Nunez, a player that looked beyond buried on John Beeline's depth chart starting in the exhibition game. We know Franz Wagner is still overcoming that wrist injury, leaving a bit of a hole there on the wing, and maybe that's why Adrian Nunez is starting. A lot of talented sophomores that haven't really shown anything, but were highly recruited players. You have the constants there, like the North Star, Xavier Simpson and John Teskey, but maybe more of an up-tempo style. So what are each of you looking for here as Michigan basketball gets started with a new era? The first time since 2007 that someone else is coaching a Michigan basketball game. Brandon, let me start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm really excited about, kind of what you mentioned, the sophomore group. We kind of know what we're getting with Xavier Simpson, John Teskey. I think Isaiah Livers, too. I think he's got a chance to really take a big leap this year. But that four-man class of Adrian Nunez, especially Brandon Johns, Colin Castleton, and David DeJulius, they're going to need a lot out of those guys, and we don't really know what to expect. I mean, DeJulius was a big-time scorer in high school. Castleton's a real athletic and versatile big. Brandon Johns, super athletic from the group, and then Adrian Nunez, the surprise of the group, I guess, is going to be the starter until maybe Franz Wagner is back, or who knows what might happen with his playing time. When Juwan Howard has his full complement of weapons to use. So I'm really intrigued by that group. Those 4 guys, you always hear about the big jump that players make from year 1 to year 2, and there's a lot of talent in that group. And again, Nunez, was, like you said, Steve, buried on the depth chart. Didn't look like he might ever play meaningful minutes at Michigan, at least under John Beilein. And now it looks like he's going to get the start in the season opener. So I'm really intrigued to see what he brings to the table and why he is suited to start. I mean, we've heard about him being a good shooter. He's got good size, but he was a lightly recruited kid and kind of seemed like an afterthought in that group. So I'm really intrigued by that group of 4 sophomores to see exactly how well they can contribute and who's going to pick up the slack when you talk about all the guys that Michigan lost from last year.
Michael, same thing to you. What are you looking for here at the start of the Juwan Howard era?
Well, I mean, obviously we want to see what the Juwan Howard offense looks like, what it looks like defensively. But, we kind of went through on our show on today on Tuesday, every player and where their ceiling is and what their best case and worst case scenario is. And, I'm really curious just to see if Xavier Simpson, is a little more confident shooting the 3-pointer. I'm curious to see where John Teskey, where he fits in. Is he on the block all the time? Do they let him space the floor? what type of presence he has defensively with the leadership and mentorship of Juwan Howard. I think the sophomore class, as Brandon said, is just so incredibly intriguing because they will dictate what type of season the Wolverines have. I mean, we think we know what you're going to get out of Xavier Simpson and John Teskey and even Isaiah Livers, he'll probably see an uptick of six points or so per game and be on the floor a little more consistently. But what do those four guys do? And this is our first opportunity. I mean, we do have a little more access to practice than we do for football, where they, Brandon's been there a couple of times. He's got to see those guys. But I mean, it's a different thing, the scrimmage situation, obviously, than against some real opponents. So I'm incredibly intrigued to see what this looks like under Juwan Howard. I'm incredibly intrigued to see what those four sophomores do after a year in which none of them really played a major role for Wolverines.
Michael, when you look at the road that Juwan has taken here to this opening game, and, there were, for example, two main objectives we all thought when he took over this job. We discussed, the self-awareness to understand you need a conciliary there. And you and I talked right after he was hired. When we discussed, the one time this has worked in recent memory was Fred Hoiberg at Iowa State. I covered that in another life. And one of the things he did right away was bringing in Bobby Lutz, the former Charlotte coach, to come in to kind of be his Tex winner, if you will. And, should Juwan Howard go down the same road? And not only did he go down the same road, but he probably got the number one person that any of us would have hoped would be realistically available for such a role in Phil Martelli, the old St. Joe's coach.
Yeah.
And then we talked about recruiting and how important this first class was going to be. Next year's team could have as many as 5 or 6 of his own players on it. And that's off to a better start than I think people thought. There's already one 5-star in the fold. He kept Zeb Jackson. We may add another or two top 50 recruits here before this is all said and done. So if you're looking for early barometers about his capability of making this step, I got to say, man, the early signs have been promising, don't you think?
Yeah, I'm really encouraged. I was really encouraged when he hired, when he surrounded himself with, with a great mentor, a great coach in Phil Martelli. I was really encouraged when he surrounded himself with, brought back Sadie Washington, who was one of John Beilein's best assistants. I was really encouraged when he hired Howard Isley, who's going to have an ability to recruit and his connections in the city of Detroit. He's already, nabbed a 5-star. So yeah, I mean, everything that Juwan has done. The worst thing Juwan has done was that sounds wrong. The biggest skeptical moment I had was when Juwan Howard got hired, and everything he's done since then, I've been very happy with and very excited about. But now we get to see if that skepticism was warranted, because now we get to see him coach basketball games. And, I think the practice side of getting these guys ready is going to be, with his staff that's surrounding him. I'm not really worried about that. I want to see in-game decisions. What does he do when a guy gets 2 fouls? What rotations does he use towards the end of the game? Things like that. I mean, there's going to be a lot of in-game stuff that you don't necessarily turn to your assistants before you make those decisions, right? You don't walk down there to Phil Martelli and say, hey, what do you think you should do in this situation? Who should we put in? Those are decisions that the head coach has to make. And so that's what I'm really curious to see what Juwan Howard does going forward here.
Brandon, it certainly helps to take that first step when you're inheriting a point guard like Xavier Simpson. And I heard you remarking recently on the radio, watching him in practice, how much direction he really does. And, I was at the first round of the NCAA tournament last March when it was here in Des Moines. I got a chance to see him up close and personal, even during commercial breaks. He doesn't take any crap from anybody, referees, nobody. I mean, he doesn't let anything slide. Nothing gets past Xavier Simpson. It helps when you inherit a quarterback on the floor like that.
No question. And I actually used the coach on the floor term today on the radio when we were talking about him, and he's exactly that. I mean, he's plugged in. He is 100% committed to being great. He will not let any of his teammates slack off. I mean, I think the example you're referring to, he was, barking at guys. He's not afraid to grab a guy by the jersey and get in his face, but he's also building guys up. He's criticizing when guys need criticizing. He's coaching. He's teaching. I mean, there was a specific moment where he kind of grabbed Adrian Nunez by the arm and said, hey, I don't remember the exact what the goal of and again, it was just drill work. We're not even talking about like a live scrimmage, 5-on-5 competition thing. It was just a drill. And he just wanted to make sure Adrian knew exactly where to go, when to receive the pass, exactly where the shot should come from. And not only was Adrian Nunez extremely plugged in and focused on what Xavier Simpson was saying to him, he went out there and did exactly what Xavier told him to do. And it's just like, it was very, and that was, again, I was watched practice for 10 or 15 minutes. It was a simple drill. It wasn't anything it wasn't even a competitive setting. It was just, he just wanted to make sure everything was done perfectly and done right. And that's what you see, from the son of a coach. And that's what you need when you're trying to do what Juwan Howard's doing and take over a new team and get things off on the right foot. And Xavier is the perfect player to have as your leader when he's conducting himself like that all the time.
Final thing on hoops before we switch to football, guys. I really think the key to this season is how long is Franz Wagner out, and here's why. With him in the lineup, just going off his reputation, you're talking about a guy that was, I think, the leading scorer for his team at the highest level of German pro basketball in their championship round last spring. I think you're dealing with a guy on the low end would have been a recruit rated about what Iggy Brasdeikis would have been considered coming out of Canada. Maybe a guy that would have been a clear top 20 level prospect. I think he's a 2-and-done at the most from everything I've seen and read. And he fills the big gaping void there on the wing, because I think you throw him in the lineup and then your other three guys are Teskey, Livers, and Simpson. I mean, that starting five, that would be one of the better starting fives in the Big Ten. But you take him out of that lineup, and now suddenly there's a lot of question marks, and you're asking guys that we haven't seen prove anything yet to produce at a higher level than what their resumes up until this point have demonstrated they can do. And when you look at our early season schedule, I mean, it doesn't take much. Creighton, what do they have, like 4 or 5 20-win seasons in the last 6 years? They're next Tuesday. You've got that tournament in the Bahamas, which is a murderer's row of opponents: Gonzaga, North Carolina, Iowa State, and Oregon. You look at the game at Louisville. I mean, I'm concerned if you don't have him and you're adjusting in this early non-conference. And I was putting together our power ratings preseason over at Wolverine Digest for Big Ten basketball, and I really think you could see anywhere of 6 or 7 or 8 teams in this league go somewhere between 8-12 and 12-8. The depth is that long and the margin is that slim. I really think how soon they can get him back and win a couple of these key non-conference games might be the key to the season, because I don't see a lot of games in the Big Ten this year for anybody, maybe outside of Michigan State, where you're saying, yeah, they're going to win that one. Yeah, they got that one. So I kind of think that's the key. When does he get back? You guys agree with that? Disagree? If not, what's your key? Michael, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I thought you were going to start with Brandon. I was going to bank off of his comments. Yeah, I think it's going to be it's interesting. I guess I just don't. I mean, other than one team, I don't know what to expect at all out of this Big Ten. I mean, we tried to do like a little bit of I don't know what to call it, power rankings, like a Big Ten predicted finish, and I think Matt Misler, one of my producers, Brandon and myself, all kind of were throwing some names out there: Maryland and Iowa and Purdue, and are any of these teams better than Michigan? Maybe 1 or 2 on paper, but they didn't exactly go out there and showcase themselves a year ago. And Mark Turgeon hasn't exactly won me over based on the way that he's coached his team into the ground. And Matt Painter's done a pretty good job at Purdue, but they lose one of their best players they lose their best player in Carson Edwards, and one of the best players in the Big Ten. I mean, Michigan State, is going to be there. After that, I don't think any of us really know. I mean, I know that one of my producers, Zach Shaw, was getting into it and saying, who he thinks is going to be really good. But, we get these things wrong every single year. I mean, last year people were predicting Minnesota. Last year people were talking about Indiana. They're talking about Ohio State. I mean, we get these things wrong all the time. So I'm going to be really fascinated, because I think there is a known quotient in what Tom Izzo has down the street, largely because of Cassius Winston and some of the players that they have coming back. But other than that, I think you're right, Steve. I think it could be, Michigan could finish as high as maybe second, and it could finish as low as like 6th or 7th in the conference this year. I don't really know. There's just so many variables and so many unknowns, and I think it's going to be exciting, one of the most exciting basketball seasons in the Big Ten in a while, just because of the unknown factor.
What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, the Franz Wagner thing is really intriguing, because he has done it at a pretty high level, but it's not anything that I can personally say I've seen. I mean, you can watch as many clips on YouTube as you want, but what's that really look like in a Michigan uniform? I mean, we expect him to be really good, and I saw him in person, at that practice before he got hurt, and I could not believe how tall and long he was for a guard and for someone who has the skill set that he has. I mean, he's standing out there on the court, and he could stand eye to eye with Brandon Johns, who's a 6'9", 6'10" power forward type coming out of high school. So that was really impressive to me, and it's a huge bummer that he's going to miss time with that wrist injury for a little while. Maybe he's back by the end of November or whenever it's supposed to be. But if he's as good as he's supposed to be, and certainly the length and athleticism that he brings off the wing, when you're talking about him replacing a guy like Adrian Nunez or Eli Brooks, who's shorter than me, I think, it's a game changer in that starting lineup, and you expect him to kind of be the guy as soon as he comes back. But it's really, again, it kind of goes back to what I started talking about. What are you going to get out of those 4 sophomores? And then how much better can it be once Franz Wagner is healthy and in the lineup? So there are a ton of question marks. I mean, probably more than there have ever been, in the last 6, 8, 10 years or whatever it's been, obviously, since John Beilein has been there. And I said this on the radio, too. I think it would have been a lot of question marks even if Beilein was back. I mean, it would have been the same cast of players, essentially. And so you just don't really know. There's just a lot of I don't knows. Michael had 4 or 5 questions on Twitter where he was asking us all these things about the Michigan season, and I'm looking before we went on air, and I'm like, I don't really know the answer to any of these. Like, is this a segment we really want to do? So, yeah, it's going to be one of those things where we have to see tonight a little bit, and then, Steve, as you mentioned, some really, really tough opponents here in the first couple of weeks of the season where we're going to find out pretty quickly what this team's all about.
All right, let's go to football. Brandon, I'll come back to you. And, I guess we can say if we had gone back, 5, 6 weeks ago and said that we were going to enjoy the luxury in November of debating the merits of a 31-point win at Maryland, given the way things were trending at the end of September. Maryland, I know it seems like it was eons ago, they were number 21 in the AP poll. That was their highest ranking in the AP poll since 2006. All right, Michigan suffered one of its maybe the worst loss to anybody not named Ohio State in the Jim Harbaugh era against Wisconsin. And, there was talk, hey, this team might go 7-5. Well, they're not going to be 7-5. They're 7-2 right now. And we spent the week debating a 31-point win at Maryland. Do we look at it as a single game where it was a business trip, they got in and got it done? Or do you look at it as, hey, we're still trying to build on whatever we are trying to identify and become as an offense? And, we still haven't developed much of a downfield passing game. And Maryland seemed like the vulnerable opponent to go out there and work out those kinks. And Michigan could not have seemed less interested in their downfield passing game, except when they absolutely needed it in one drive in the second half and at the drive at the end of the first half for a field goal attempt. Other than that, it was, pretty blasé. So that was the debate throughout the course of this week. Brandon, which of these camps do you come down?
It's kind of a cop-out, but I think it's a little bit of both. I do. I think it was a business trip. They got in and got out and ho-hum, a 31-point win. I mean, that's tough to do on the road against any team. I mean, I've referenced this example many, many times. I mean, Wisconsin went into Champaign and lost to Illinois, and Oklahoma lost to Kansas State, and Notre Dame got absolutely pounded by Michigan in Ann Arbor. So, I mean, it happens. So to go there and get a 31-point win without even, did the guys even sweat? I don't know. It just seemed like one of those games where you're like, okay, I guess they won by 30 points. Like, I don't know. It's hard to get upset over a 30-point win on the road in conference. But at the same time, I'm right there with you. Like, I would have loved to see Shea Patterson air it out a little bit, get those other guys involved. He threw for 150 yards. Like, that's crazy in today's college football, I think, especially when you talk about a team like Maryland, who is literally one of the worst in the country at defending the pass. And you've got 3 guys who certainly think they're going to be playing in the NFL at wide receiver. I mean, they haven't done a whole lot this year that makes me too confident about that. But, the one deep ball to Nico Collins for 51 yards and a 29-yard wheel route to Sean McCune down the left sideline was it. I mean, that was it for down the field passing. After the game, Jim Harbaugh said we really had the downfield passing game working, and I'm thinking, like, what? Like, no, you didn't. You threw for 150 yards. And one of my predictions before the game was that Shea Patterson would finally break the 300-yard mark in a Michigan uniform, and he got halfway there. And so I think there's a little bit of both. I think it was like, let's go in. We're going to be able to win this game pretty much with ease, and they did. But I would have really loved to see them, play with the passing game a little bit, get guys involved. I mean, Donovan Peoples-Jones had 2 catches for 11 yards. I don't know. I'm still thinking they need to be able to throw the ball better than that. But, the running game wasn't exactly on point that day either. So I feel bad coming away complaining about a big win, but that's how I felt, and I don't think I can really change that.
Michael, Michigan finishes with 331 yards of offense, and most college football teams cannot win a game against another Power 5 team with only that yardage. Michigan won this one by 31 points, and my big takeaway, and I mentioned this at the top of the show, and I wrote this for Wolverine Digest after the game as well. I think what we've learned is that speed and space is dead. Whatever it was supposed to be, whatever they wanted it to be, it's gone. And Harball lives, if you will, and they had to go back to this to save the season. The offense was imploding. The install was bad. Who knows? We're not at practice camp. We don't know. But it threatened to wreck this entire season, and they had to restore some form of equilibrium. And so they're going back to their happy place. And this looks a lot like the offense we saw last year with maybe more formation versatility, but in terms of its approach and philosophy, very similar. And it's helped to stabilize this season. I don't think anybody would deny that. I think now the question becomes, can the fifth time be the charm against Ohio State? Does this work at home against them in a few weeks? And really the only goal left for this season really was finally beating them. And I think depending on how you answer that question probably determines your view of this last game against Maryland, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't real thrilled with the game against Maryland, but you know what? I've been trying to look at this from every angle, really. And I wonder if, Michigan looks back and says, hey, what we almost had them in 2016. And what we almost had in 2016 was a team that won field position, that played great defense because they did in that game. And we tried to have a quarterback that didn't make big mistakes. He got picked off twice. He had the fumble on the goal line. One of the interceptions was not really his fault. He got hit as he released it. Some bad blocking, probably a bad decision by the coaches to call a play action from like their own 2-yard line. But it is what it is at this point. And, if you look at last year's game, they thought they really had, a solid game plan that was going to emphasize running the football, controlling the clock, winning field position. And they just never expected Ohio State to come out there and burn their defense like they did. And so if you look at this season and how the season has developed, two things that have really come on over the last 4 weeks is the play of their defense and the play of their running game. And so if you're looking at it and going, what is our best opportunity to win this game? Let's bank on those two things. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And a lot of people will accuse us of being insane because we've been banging our head against the wall doing the same thing over and over again. But it's still what we've got. We don't have a downfield passing game because we don't have a quarterback that can execute it. Maybe part of that is the receivers not getting open, whatever it is, but that hasn't been there for Michigan football this year. So they're going to try to do what they think has been their strength or what their strength has been in the last 4 or 5 weeks, and that's running game and defense. Will it work? I guess we're all going to find out. It hasn't worked so far. It didn't. It came very close to working in 2016. And, it didn't work in 2017, but a lot of that was because of the quarterback situation. It didn't work last year. It failed spectacularly. Well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but I mean, I don't think it's going to work. I need to see it work before I'm going to say, like, absolutely, they had a great game plan.
Sometimes, Michael, people tell you things by what they don't say. And then ultimately you can just read with from there what they actually do. And maybe we just need to come to grips, and it's just not in Jimmy's MO to go there. In fact, I heard his coach's show last night, and he actually mentioned that Shea Patterson missed. He didn't mention him by name. He just said, we missed a couple of throws where guys were open, and those could have been big plays, which, that's about as close to specified criticism of a player that you'll get from Jim Harball, particularly his quarterbacks. And we saw that in year one with Jake Rudock. When Rudock was struggling those first 2 months, he was very protective of him. He's a former quarterback himself, so he protects his guys. And I think we just need to factor that into our analysis and look at what he's not saying based on what they're doing. And I think maybe we just need to come to grips with the fact Shea Patterson's just not a 5-star quarterback here. And that ultimately that if you're going to go to this system, it's quarterback centric. You can't hide your quarterback's deficiencies in any way. He either puts up all Big Ten, all American numbers, or he drags the whole team down. And I think Shea Patterson's a nice player. He's a gutty player, guys like him, but in terms of his ability to carry and be the face of a program, that's just not him. And I think that ultimately they had to turn him back to what we saw last year, which was the glorified game manager. We saw this in the Peach Bowl. That probably should have been our first hint. With Karan Higdon out, sitting out the game, and he just can't carry the weight of a program unto himself. And I think that this is a nice, kind way of admitting that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's honestly, I'm going to have a Michigan football chatter, I think either later this week or early next week before the Michigan State game. And I mean, talking to a couple people in the program, one of the things I've been told is they had to they had to do a little, not maybe a mirror check because they're looking at their own offense, but they had to look at what they had and they realized, like, we don't have what you just said. We don't have a guy that can chuck it downfield and can make a lot of big plays, explosive plays. He gets nervous in the pocket. Anytime we ask him to stay in the pocket for more than a few seconds, he gets nervous in there. He likes to get outside and throw on the run, but that's not very conducive to us throwing the ball down the field or throwing bubble screens like they've liked to do the last couple of weeks. So we just got to play with what we've got, and they're trying to do their best with that. And, and if it doesn't work out, I don't think they're going to come in, Jim Harball, the way that he has handled the media, he's not going to come to the press conference and go like, hey, our quarterback really screwed us in this game. But I think there's going to be a lot of sense of that they just don't have the quarterback play that they need in order to be successful, maybe against Ohio State. We'll see. They're going to have to overcome it, I guess is what we're saying. They're going to have to overcome their deficiencies at the quarterback position to beat Ohio State.
I think it comes down to this question. Can Shea Patterson make the 2 or 3 throws John O'Korn could not make in 2017? I think it comes down to that. Don't you, Michael? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. It really does. They need to have that type of defense performance that they had for the first 3 quarters of that game.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be able to run the football a little bit. I mean, they're not going to get 4.5, 5 yards per carry against Ohio State. They're just not. But if they can move it a little bit, I mean, this is going to have to be the best game that Michigan has played all year. And I mean, if we go back and look at it, this is probably going to have to be the best game that Michigan football has played in 5 years to beat Ohio State.
Yeah. I agree. So, Brandon, that's our final question. You get the last word here. How much of what we're seeing is just an admission that Michigan will never say out loud? It's not their style, and it's not, Jimmy's a player's coach. It's not his job. He's not his style to throw players under the bus. But they're speaking volumes by what they're doing on Saturdays. How much of this is just an admission that Shea Patterson just can't, he can't carry a team at that level. He just can't do it. And so we got to put him in positions where he can be successful without, imploding at the same time.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I mean, everybody thought he was something way more than that. And so it's maybe been a hard pill. It's been a hard pill for me to swallow.
It's a hard pill for me to swallow too. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have swallowed it.
I kept thinking like, okay, he's going to find it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he just hasn't. And, going to some of the football 101 things that I go to with Michael and where we watch Devin Gardner break film down and, really slow plays down. The interception against Iowa is one that just comes back to me over and over and over again. It was a kind of a ladder route. You had Eric All at about 8 or 10 yards, and I can't remember who the receiver was that Patterson actually tried to throw to that it got intercepted. It was, I don't know, 2nd and minimal or 3rd and minimal, whatever it was, 6, 8 yards or something like that. If he just tosses it out to Eric All, he catches it and turns up and gets a first down, maybe without even being touched, just kind of carries himself out of bounds. Instead, he tried to do some throw and it got intercepted. And Devin said after that, like, your offensive coordinator cannot dial up anything easier than that. Like, that's backyard, middle school, 1-read or 2-read football. Like, it does not get any simpler than that. And Shea still managed to screw it up somehow. And he's done some good things and he's had some good moments. But I mean, Michael and I have talked over and over about, why isn't he keeping it on zone reads? And why is it just like, there's been a lot of head scratching whys when watching Shea Patterson. And I think the coaches aren't dumb. They know more about football than we could ever want to. They're seeing it too. So you're right. They're not ever going to come out and say it, but I can just imagine in film session, they're probably like, what the hell is he doing? Like, I don't know how else they could be thinking anything else at this point. And I like Shea. I thought he was going to be really, really good, and it just hasn't worked out that way. And, he's got 4 games left in a Michigan uniform, and I don't see a landslide change in what he's been. And so, yeah, they're trying to win with what they have, and it just hasn't been as good as what they probably thought it was when he transferred in.
And I know what people in the comments section here are going to say, which is, well, then why has he been the quarterback? Well, the die was cast when Dylan McCaffrey was put in that game against Wisconsin to get decapitated and then basically missed a month. And once that happened, the die was cast. You were going to have to, Shea Patterson was going to be your ride or die for 2019 at that point. And in order for that to be successful, they had to dial back their hopes of having a more quarterback-centric offense to alleviate some of the responsibilities on him, because it was clear he couldn't handle it. And I think now you've watched that they've dialed that back. I mean, even the game against Notre Dame, you're watching that game, and you guys are in the press box, so you didn't see this live, but Kirk Herbstreit is literally just saying that he's really impressed that Shea has adopted more of a field general these last couple of games and matured. And on the very next play is when he tries that, mind-numbed left-handed in the rain chuck and duck that nearly put Notre Dame back in the game. It was the very next play. And so, you're still nervous. He's a senior. You're still nervous when he goes back there to throw. And that's just, if we're nervous, what do you think the coaches are thinking? If we're the ones that are nervous, they're probably nervous too. Yeah. So mitigate his vulnerability. It's clear that's what the game plan is about.
Yeah, it's interesting, Steve. I mean, that's one of the things with these football 101s we do with Devin Gardner, where he's always talking about how the moment that your quarterback does something completely out of character, or that you feel hamstrings you as a coaching staff, you just change your entire game plan the rest of the way. And we've seen enough of that out of Shea Patterson this year that I think the trust factor, if you got the coaches together and you said, do you 100% trust your quarterback? They'd say no. Do you say 90% no, 80% no, 75% no, 70% no? I mean, I think it might be like 50-50. They trust their quarterback 50% of the time.
Yeah.
And you just really can't do much when you trust your quarterback 50% of the time. I mean, that was an abomination of a play. I mean, like, what the hell was he thinking? I mean, you're in a game you're controlling, and you're going to turn to your left and try to throw the ball left-handed to what? Like, even if you had best case scenario in that play is what? Is that he gets it not up to the line of scrimmage and he gets called for intentional grounding in the same position? It was a mind-numbing decision there. I didn't get it, and so there's a lot of that going on, and it is what it is. Again, yeah, as we've said a couple of times here, to beat Ohio State, they're going to have to overcome, probably their biggest weakness, and that's at the quarterback position. Because I'm doing grades right now for Wolverine Digest, and I'm going through, and running back, you got to feel really good about running back right now. You got to feel really good about the offensive line. The tight ends and wide receivers are conditioned on how the quarterback play, and they're kind of stuck right now. But this is a fairly good offense, and it just can't reach its full potential because it's not getting the type of quarterback play you need to be a great offense.
Gentlemen, always good to have you with us here on Michigan Podcast. Brandon Brown, Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor and Wolverine Digest. Thanks again for joining us this week. Take care. Go Blue.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Michigan Podcast brought to you by Wolverine Digest, now part of Sports Illustrated. That's right, the SI.com network. That's myself, Steve Deace, Michael Spath, and Brandon Brown, bringing you tons of content each and every day at WolverineDigest.com, and it's all free. Analysis, video, commentary, breakdowns, everything you need to be an informed Michigan fan. You're going to get it every single day at WolverineDigest.com. And keep in mind, we don't require access to the program in order for us to generate content. So we give you unvarnished, unfiltered analysis. Yes, we're Michigan fans. We want Michigan to do well, but we don't see it any other way other than calling balls and strikes, and that includes the home team too. Go to WolverineDigest.com now. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, how confident are you Michigan football wins out in November? Overwhelmingly, not at all was the answer. 61% of you. So that's a clear majority saying not at all confident. About a third of you, 30 points less, 31% saying you have no idea. That would be my answer. 8% of you, extremely confident. as they once said in the movie When Harry Met Sally, I'll have what you're having. Okay, I'd like to have some of that extreme confidence. Let's get to this week's question of the week. Comes from Shane Majewski, who says, why can't Michigan just throw these short passes to its receivers like Oregon does? Michigan has shifty receivers. I just don't get it. Well, you know what, Shane, I get why you're saying that, but do we really have shifty receivers? What we have are your pro-style, long, striding receivers. You see it on Donovan Peoples-Jones' punt returns, where if you let him get a step or two, but he struggles to get a step or two because he's not a quick twitch guy. He's a great speed guy, but he's more of that NFL prototypical size speed ratio guy. Same thing with Nico Collins. Same thing with Tariq Black. And you wonder, where's his athleticism after, having major surgery on both of his feet? Those guys, they have that NFL speed and size, but I don't know that we would describe any of those guys really as shifty. And in this kind of an offense, it's actually of greater benefit to have a guy who's quicker in closed, confined space than has great long speed, because you're looking to exploit matchups in space to create creases. All right. And that's what we don't have a lot of. Ronnie Bell's just beginning to come on where that's concerned. You've got some promising young players there, and Mike Sanderstill and Giles Jackson. You'll bring a couple of more in next year with Eamon Dennis and Roman Wilson. But yeah, I don't know that we have shifty receivers. I think we have more of your prototypical throw it up and let him go get it NFL guys. And I think that's been another adjustment that has been a struggle in switching to this speed and space offense. But those are just my 2 cents. Thanks for the note, Shane. Thanks to all of you for watching and listening this week. So whether it's YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, please 5-star reviews, likes, shares, subscribes, whichever is the case may be at the platform that you use to access us, please do so. Share this with all the Michigan fans you know as well. That helps to spread our word of mouth. Want to thank our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast who help spread the word about this each week too. We will be back at it again next week. Michigan will have played a couple of basketball games by that time. And then we get ready for Sparty Week, the big in-state rivalry, that and more next week right here on Michigan Podcast.